This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you are in the right place. Welcome to our flower series. In this video, we'll be making buttercream cosmos. The video itself will be broken down into segments so you can rewatch or skip ahead as desired. We'll be covering how to make your colors, the bags and tips that we've used, the techniques, how we use those to build our blossoms, and then we'll be practicing both on our flower nail and on a cupcake. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, check out some of the other ones in our flower series. So let's get started with our color mixing. We're using a simple or American style buttercream, but you can use whatever you want. I've got just a little bit in this bowl, and I'm gonna make a nice bright kind of intense shade of kind of purpley pink to start with. And we're using liquid gel colors, and we're going to use a couple of shades. Neon bright pink, red red, some violet, and finally a little bit of lemon yellow when we make our centers. But let's start with our nice intense purple color. And these are going to be kind of deep shades, so I'm going to be using drops. And I'm going to start with a drop of purple, like half of a red, so just squeeze it out and give it a little touch. That'll help you control. And 2 of my pink. We're going to mix it around and see what we get. And we're looking for something that reads as kind of a nice berry purple. And I think that's going to be fantastic, especially once it's had time to develop some. So you can see you get that bit of pink, that red in there as well, and it just changes the tone of that purple to being more of a kind of plum or berry shade, and that's going to be beautiful, and it's nice and intense. So we just used a tiny bit of buttercream and those larger amounts of color, and that'll give you a nice intense shade for that. So for our second color, we're also going to be going for a nice purpley pink hue. You can see we've got a bit more buttercream in here, and I'm going to start with my pink and just do a nice big drop. There we go. And then I'm just going to go with just a small amount of that purple. So I have a bit of a drop squeezed out. I'm just going to give it a little touch just to control it. You can always use a toothpick if you really want to be more exacting on the amounts and get a precise amount in there. But we're looking for kind of like an intense sort of lilac shade, and I think this is gonna hit it right on the head. Oh yeah, there we go. Beautiful, and it's gonna look nice against that nice deep shade that we make that's gonna be the outer edge of the petals, and this will be the center, so it'll be a nice kind of intense shade of that like lilac pink purple color. So our final color is going to be yellow, and we're using this for the centers. So I've just got a little bit down in the bowl, and I'm just going to go with a nice full drop of that lemon yellow. Since we're just looking to make a nice citrusy shade that's really going to pop against those purples and give us a really good intensity so it stands out. And that will do it. It looks beautiful, and we are ready to load up our bags and start having fun. So we've got our colors ready. Let's talk about the bags and tips we're going to use. We're going to use 2 12-inch decorator bags. I've got them both fitted with tips. The first one is going to be for our yellow. It's got a number 2 on there, so just a nice plain round tip. A 2 or 3 will do. Nothing too big, but also not too small. And then the second one is a 125K. So you can see this is one of those nice Korean tips. It is really super skinny, but you've got that nice little pointed skinny end up there. And we are going to stripe this bag. So I wanted to show you how I'm going to load it up. So I've got it already folded over about halfway. You can see that makes a nice little pocket in there for your hand, so you can get your hand up in there so you can control the opening of the bag, and it makes it easier to load. And when you're striping, you just want to be aware of how the tip is oriented so you layer that color in there in the right place. So I just want to get my bag like that. I'm going to start with my darker shade, and I'm going to use a tapered offset spatula just to really control where it's going. So I'm just going to kind of gently apply some buttercream onto the back of that And this is going to help me get, right, a nice controlled application, a nice little ribbon there, right lining up with the top of that tip. And I actually have it lined up with the seam of the bag as well, just as a nice little guide. And you can see it's really easy then with my hand up inside that fold to just gently place that down in there and get a nice kind of thin stripe that's going to line up with the top edge of those petals. And you can see when I'm striping, generally I leave a little space between the frosting and the tip. That way, if you get a little off on your application, you can still turn the tip back and forth before you squeeze the frosting down. But it's really easy to control, and you can see the bag will just stay open for you because there's not much on there. And if you want to be really careful about your application of your second color, instead of using a rubber spatula, I'm just going to use one of my nice little blunt end straight spatulas. And that's going to give me a nice little way to get in down there next to that first color, right? And just go on the opposite side. So just really get down in there. And I'm just going to fill that void with some color. And then when I press down, the color should feed in the order that you've applied it to the bag. I'm just going to go ahead and load up all of that lighter lilac color. And just give it a little push down to help fill up that space. And that should give me beautiful petals that are lighter in the center and darker on the outside edges. So when you're ready, fold that bag up. Check the orientation, make sure it's lined up the way you want it to be with your tip all the way around, and then I just kind of squeegee everything down, and that should kind of load it up in place so you get the effect that you want. So our bags are ready to go. We're going to pull out our trays and talk about how we're going to form these flowers. So let's talk about the parts of these flowers. We're going to make our petals with our 125K and our center with a number 2. So with that 125K, we're going to hold it so that the skinny end is facing out. It's going to be the outer edge of the petals, and the fat end is towards the center. We're going to slide out and do a little wiggle at the end since they have kind of little, I don't know how to call them. They're almost like torn edges on these petals. They've got these little spikes to them, and it's going to give them that characteristic look and feel. And once we've created that, we're going to pull back. And this is all going to be in a very short space. They're kind of these flat, narrow petals that have that little bit of that torn effect on the end, and they look really delicate and really pretty. So once we get all of our petals on there, we're going to go ahead and do the centers. And we'll pipe a little spiral underneath, really easy to do, and then we're just going to cover it in dots. And dots are one of those things that it can be hard to get looking perfectly, and it's something that a lot of people want to practice, and the centers of your flowers are a great place to practice them because they're busy, so people won't really notice the imperfections. You want to hold your bag straight up and down when you're making a dot, just above the surface so that frosting can flow out, balloon, make a nice big full dot. And then when you stop, when it's reached that full size, you just want to stop squeezing and gently kind of make a little circular motion with that tip so that it just kind of shaves off that top and doesn't leave a peak. And that'll give you a dot versus a Hershey kiss. And it can take a while to really master that, and it usually takes some focus even for experienced decorators to make sure you're getting dots instead of kisses. So it's just something to work on as you go and try and focus on. And that'll give you a nice finish to those flowers. But we're going to combo a bunch of dots together to make those centers. So pretty easy techniques and really beautiful flowers. So let's talk about how we're going to use those techniques to build our actual blossoms. If we're piping on a flower nail and we're going to be transferring them, we're actually going to do an extra step. You can pipe these directly on a cake and they'll still look fantastic. It'll actually be a little easier to handle. These petals are going to be kind of thin and delicate, so if you're going to be piping them on a nail and you want to move them, I'm going to go ahead and pipe just a little flat disc there in the center, and that's going to give a central point to kind of tether all those petals together and make them a little easier to handle once they've been chilled. We're going to go ahead and just pipe our petals. right? So just go around our circle, pipe as many as you can get in there. I like to have some of them almost overlapping or touching, and some of them with a little space apart from each other. Since our disc is there in the center, joining them together, that should keep them kind of intact and together. Without having to worry about petals breaking off when you transfer them, but you do want to be careful with these when you transfer them because those petals will be pretty thin and delicate. So you want to make sure they get nice and firm in either the refrigerator or the freezer, and then handle them pretty quickly. We're going to go ahead and then pipe a nice spiral in the center. So we're just going to take that 2-tip, start with a dot, and basically draw a full circle around it kind of flat. This is going to give us a little disc that we're then going to go ahead and cover in dots. And that'll give us a little bit of domed, a little bit of height, and also a little bit of stability there in the middle, kind of anchoring those petals together. And when you put it all together, it's going to give you a wonderful, beautiful Cosmo flower. And we're doing it in a 2-tone purple petal, but these come in a bunch of different colors as well. So you could literally cover a cake in beautiful cosmos and put in a lot of variety in terms of the colors there. So now that we've talked about how we're going to use our techniques to build our blossom, let's go ahead and break out our flower nail and get to practicing. So let's get started. We're working on our nail, so we're going to pipe that disc first. And we've got our bag so that the tip is laying flat, and you'll notice the back end of the bag is pointing towards about 3 o'clock. So just imagine a little clock face, and we're holding it out towards that 3 o'clock position. I'm just going to give it a quick spin there just to get us started, right? It gives us a nice little base to anchor all those petals on, and you won't really see it once we're done with our piping. And we're going to go ahead and start pulling petals. So we're going to line up so that the fat end is in the center, the skinny end is pointing out, and we're going to pull out the length of the nail, wiggle just a little bit, and then pull back. And you can see we're going for the center being right there in the middle. And we're piping on top of that little disc that we made. And I'm going to have some of them so that they're touching, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of a gap. So turn just a little bit more because that frosting is going to push out just a little bit. And allow just a little space in between some of them. It makes for a nice, beautiful effect. And just keep going until you have petals all the way around. Some with a tiny bit of space between, some without. And you can see we're getting just a little bit of that striped effect on the edge. We've got just a little bit of that dark purple showing through. It makes for a nice, beautiful effect on the edges of those petals. Once you've covered that surface in petals, you can see we've got some gaps between some and not others. We're going to go ahead and make that little spiral with our yellow. So make sure you're holding straight up and down. I'm just going to start with a dot in the center and just draw a circle all the way around. This gives me a nice little disc to build up those dots on, and I'm just going to go around and make those dots like I talked about. Squeeze, stop, and then give it a little circle to kind of help finish it off. So once I go around the outside edge, I'm just going to pipe on top of that disc and cover that whole surface with dots. And that gives us that lovely look of those little centers that have that wonderful little texture on that. And that gives us a beautiful buttercream Cosmo. Now that we've practiced on our nail, we're going to go ahead and pull out a cupcake and practice one on the surface of that as well. So next, we're going to pipe on a cupcake, and you can see I've just flat iced it, and since the flower is going to be directly on the surface that it's intended to be on and we don't need to move it, we don't actually need to pipe that disc to begin with. You can just start going with your petals. So you just line it up like you would on a nail and have that fat end towards the center, skinny end pointing out, and we're in that kind of lay flat position where the back of the bag is at like 3 o'clock, and you just want to start pulling those petals getting that wriggle and pulling back towards the center. And then just rotate that cupcake or rotate your cake if you're working on a cake, and just keep going. So you can actually get just a little more definition and control with these. You can kind of make more spaces and make a little more drama when you go directly on the cake, because you can see you can leave more gaps and still have a really stable flower. So I actually like piping cosmos directly on the surface that they're going to stay on. But if you want to pipe things ahead of time and your cake's not ready, you can always do them on the flower nail. I just definitely recommend piping that disc underneath to make them more stable. And then once we're finished with our petals, we're going to go in and do our center. So we'll start with just that nice little disc, pipe a dot, give it a coil all the way around. That gives us something to pipe on, gives us a little bit of a guide for our spacing and our shape. And just go all the way around with your dots. And once you finish going all the way around, we'll go on top and just fill in until that surface is covered. And that gives us a beautiful buttercream Cosmo. You can see we have those lovely little two-tone petals. We've just got that nice bit of striping on the outside edge with that dark purple. Gives them a lovely, delicate feel, and those petals just have that natural little wrinkling, variegated feel to them with that kind of feathered edge at the outside. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.